So, hello everyone. Welcome to another live stream. I'm excited to have as my guest Brittany Myers. She's an amazing character designer. I have had the privilege to work with her. She has worked for Sony Pictures Animation, Netflix, Glen Keane Productions, and Blue Sky. An amazing talent. Welcome to the stream.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I've missed our conversations. We've not met or spoken much in person, but I know that every time we do, it's like an instant, like, how is working from home for you? How are you doing? Are you staying sane?
Yeah.
How is it going?
Yeah, but you have moved several times, I think, since the last time we met.
Yes. Yeah. I think. Oh man, I moved back home to the Midwest at one point. I think when we were both on at Sony, working for Sony. You were obviously away, and then I was in the Midwest while everyone else was in the studio, and then eventually I moved to LA. I made so many. My poor car was like having to make cross country trips like every 6 months. But I was in LA for a bit. That's when I worked on. I finished I worked at Sony, and then I worked with Glenn for Netflix for Pearl Studios as well. And then it was really because of my boyfriend Jacob in New York. He works at Blue Sky as a lighter, and we'd been long distance forever, and so it had been like, I think at that point it had been 3 years, and so I was like, okay, he can't move. He's a lighter, so it's not as easy for him to move for what he does. Whereas like I could, we can work from wherever. And so I decided, I was like, okay, well, New York's beautiful. And every time I went to visit him, I loved it. And so we were in the city. And then we moved to the city. And then about a month ago, we moved out of New York City to just upper New York. And so it's beautiful. We're enjoying the nature. And now's the best time to enjoy the nature because that's all we have.
So you can still go out. You can still go out.
Yeah. So right now, like where we are, luckily, we're in just this really nice neighborhood that just is kind of more like where I grew up in the Midwest. Is open trees, houses, but people are staying their distance. It's so funny because when we moved to the house, there were so many neighbors that were trying to be as welcoming as they can during a pandemic. They would ding dong ditch and leave like wine on the doorstep, or like leave notes in our mailbox, and they're like, we want to make you cookies, but we didn't know if you'd even accept them with everything going on. But it's been really nice. And I think, because in the city we couldn't, you can go out with a mask and everything, but you shouldn't really. It's so congested. You're just walking next to people all the time, and there's a lot of people that just aren't following the rules. And so it was just kind of eerie. And so luckily it was crazy moving during a pandemic. Like, it was just crazy. All the stuff, the precautions. It was so weird. Jacob and I always joke, it felt like we were pulling off like a heist or something, because it was like everything, it was just normal. Like, we were moving. It was just we were doing normal things, but it was like everything was like, because of all the social distancing, it was like, you have to sign this from across the room, and then we're going to meet you, and we're going to leave in another room. You have to bring your own pen. It's like, It was so weird, but we did it, and we're happy. And now I finally have my own office. That's an update. I finally have a place where my bed is not next to work, which is so helpful.
Yeah, I remember I had that too. I had this small room where everything was in one room, and not just physically all this stuff gets blurred, but also in your mind, everything becomes one big mess. And to have this separate room where you can close the door,
Yes.
that's
Oh my God, yeah. Yeah, because it's hard enough having, like you're saying, it's like hard enough when it's already, you work from home, so it's already your house, so it's already where you do spend most of your time. But at least, like you said, you can close the door, and it's kind of like a mental walk out of whatever you're doing there. I know, like, it was so, I mean, when it was, so it's only been a month I've had a separate space, but already I'm like, my sleep's been better. Like, 'cause I think I would just, get off of my work desk and straight into bed, and it would be like, you're still thinking like, did I send this off? Did I do a good job? I'm a terrible designer. Like, and then you go into the spiral of like, oh my God. Um, but yes, so that is a great addition.
Yeah, the spiral we all know.
Yes, yes, of course. Oh man.
And so if we go back a little, because the way I remember, uh, you were suddenly there as a character designer working for the big studios. How did you start out, and how did you? Because I think a lot of people they always ask, how did you break into the industry? I want to break into the
Yeah.
industry. So how did you do this?
Yeah, it was kind of it happened very fast, and I was very lucky. And I feel like I met a lot of people somehow that help. So many people say it's about connections, and it's not all about connections, but it does help to have people, like, people helped me, give me opportunities to do my own work to get into studios. So I started, like, I had gone to the Disney internship when I was 18 out of high school. And it was and they weren't even taking high school kids from the internship. It was just college students. And it was because I went to CTN that I met uh, Dawn Yamazi, and she was like, you should apply. And I was like, I'm not in college. And she was like, well, you should apply anyway. And so it was like little things. And the only reason I went to CTN, it's all tied back to different, little wild chances. It was like, I went to CTN only because there was this guy I met who worked at DreamWorks who offered to give me the guest pass or whatever to go. So it was like, and then I wouldn't have met Dawn. And then Dawn is what got me the Disney internship. And then I met Jacob, my boyfriend, there. So that would have, he was an intern as well. And then I think I learned a lot from that. And then I think I went to school right after that. And then I think having that Disney experience really early was very lucky. But I also went into school realizing how much you learned on the job versus school. I didn't love school, but I think I was also a little spoiled with the Disney internship because I was at that point. So yeah, I was just like, well, I know what it's, I didn't know everything about what it's like in a studio because I was just an intern, but I knew the atmosphere a little bit, and I could see how much you just learned by doing. And at school, I just didn't feel that way. I didn't feel like we were doing enough. And so then I left school after 1 year,
What
and
what
then
kind of
I
school was that?
I went to Cal Arts, and so it
Okay.
was, yeah, so it was very expensive, and it was very. So I was in their character animation program, and so they'll teach you, and it's very broad. Like, I mean, it's character animation, but they'll have CG classes, storyboard classes, and it's a great spectrum for everything, especially if you don't know what you want to do. You'll test all of that out, and I think that's a great thing school is for. But I think I just knew, I mean, I'd been drawing characters specifically since I was 12, and I was like, at that point, I knew that that's what I wanted to just do characters, and I just kind of knew that. And so I think it was also on me because I went into school not wanting to do any of the other assignments because I was like, well, I don't want to do that, And CalArts, I will say, was like, we didn't have grades or anything. It was like very, you were kind of able to get away with. I know, like, Jacob went to Ringling and they were a little more strict about like getting your stuff done, whereas CalArts was a little more lenient, which is a blessing or a curse. Like, for me, it was great because it meant I could I was a little slacking on the assignments, but then I spent so much of it on, my personal work doing character design after class. But then I guess it was a curse to me in a way because I felt like we were paying so much money and I wasn't using the resources, but I just think, I don't know, I didn't. It was a lot of money for just feeling like you're kind of left to your own devices, I guess,
Yeah.
which some people loved and some people didn't. But I think I just wasn't, I was more focused on, I already kind of knew what I wanted to do. And at least they were great at story and other things, but I think, at least in my opinion, that design they didn't have much for visual development or design. And so I feel like a lot of the students I knew who wanted to do that as well, we kind of kind of left and sprouted out early because it just was kind of a lot of money for,
Hmm.
not getting to focus on what we kind of enjoyed anyway. And so it felt like, if anything, it felt like it wasn't a terrible, like some people loved it, loved CalArts and enjoyed it. But I think for the people that knew they weren't spending the time doing design and character design, I think they knew they were kind of wasting time. If anything, you probably know that as
Hmm.
well. It's like, it just, that any second, you want to, there's so much already in character design specifically that you need to learn. And so if you're spending time doing other things that
Yeah.
you're not going to use, it's kind of like, well,
Yeah.
I don't, it was just, it felt like, if anything, you were just kind of losing, that chance to work and hone in and do better at the actual character design stuff. So then I think I left school, but then I focused on just my own stuff and portfolio and um, just work, because I knew I didn't want to be an animator. So I was like, I want to do character design. I just kind of left for a few months, did my own thing, and since just kept updating my online stuff. And that's how Sony happened. Is someone reached out after posting a bunch, and so so much of everything, is online, as I'm sure you know, and so it was just a lot of posting and just focusing. I mean, I think that's how I got in. I can't stress enough how much internet has helped,
Hmm.
and I say luck a lot. Like, I got lucky, but it's like luck. It's just random. Like, you don't know when things are gonna come, and you don't really, you just can't really guess, or it's just kind of chance when things do come. If you get a certain email, it just kind of happened. But it's because I was posting so much at the time, and I think that would just, and I was posting what I wanted to do and the kind of stuff that I was doing, so that led to people seeing it, and then things started to come, and so that's kind of it's difficult because I don't know for everybody. I never did apply. I never did apply actually for a position. It was always through the internet. So I think
Hmm.
to break in, at least in my experience, I know other people do it in other different ways, but in my experience, it was getting yourself out there was really, I mean, even not online, even just going to CTN and talking to everybody. And now Lightbox is, well, not, now they're not happening this year, but those were so helpful. Just so getting yourself out there online, but also going to CTN. And I was so nervous to go to CTN. I remember the first, when I was like younger, and it was the first time I was going, I was like, oh my God, I don't know. I was going kind of on my own. My mom flew out with me, but I was like going to the event on my own, and I was so shy and nervous, and I was just kind of not wanting, you were supposed to go ask. It's good to go ask and show your portfolio around and like talk to people. And it's like, we're all kind of, for some of us that are kind of shy, and especially at least about our work, like a lot, even if we're not shy people, it's like typically we're not very, it's kind of typical of artists to be kind of like hiding their stuff
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
the,
Yeah.
it's a lot to put your stuff out there. And so, so I was like walking around my portfolio and forcing myself to ask people, like, I was welcome to critique, but it was more just like, it's so hard to like, sit
Of
there
course. Yeah.
and, or you just don't want to bother people. And I feel like, and you're not bothering people when you ask for a portfolio critique, but that's what it feels like.
Yeah.
So you
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
kind of put yourself out there. Yeah.
Yeah, and
So
especially because the your heroes are there.
yes,
The
yeah,
people you admire are the ones you want to show your portfolio to. So that's extra
yeah.
scary. So I think when it comes to breaking in,
Mhm.
everyone has a personal story that's different, and very often people say, well, when I started out, this is how it worked, and it's probably different now. So I think there is not just one way to do this, but I think there's always these elements in there, and I think you
Mhm.
mentioned that the networking and having the connections and putting yourself out there, those are always elements that are in there, and I think one is also part of it, and that's you have to be really good. And I think that's definitely the case. And I was
Yeah,
wondering when you because when you did the internship at Disney,
yeah.
they don't take just anybody. So what did you do before that? Because you mentioned you drew a lot, but did you have a specific way of actually studying, or was it just drawing for fun, or did you have a specific goal?
Yeah, I think I definitely know. I mean, in high school, I and like I kind of mentioned earlier, I started drawing at like 12. or 13, it was when Tangled came out, and that's when my fascination with Glenn Keane began, because I was finding all his Rapunzel sketches and I just loved it. And that's what, I realized, oh, this is a job. I can actually draw a character, because I was at that point just drawing like pretty girls and whatever. And I was like, oh, people do this, and it's a job and you can go into it. So that's when the interest started. And then from there, it was really just that. It was like I would just print out. I wouldn't even use sketchbooks at the time. I would use like printer paper and like clipboard it. So that way, because and I wish I didn't do this because I wish I could have saved all of it, but I would do that so that I could just easily throw something away. I was like embarrassed of keeping something if I didn't like it, and so I'd throw it all away. And so, but I just drew for fun. Like after, I think it was kind of late middle school, I guess, into high school, and I didn't love school, and I would draw during class, like I think probably a lot of us do, and I wouldn't. I would just spend. I mean, it was really quickly into high school. My family will remember that I just remember I was so closed off because I'd be in my room drawing all the time, and they'd be like, "What are you doing?" And they knew what eventually it was like they knew. They just didn't. I was just so focused, and it was actually, I drew so much, and I don't regret putting that much work into it. And I don't know where that, I don't have that energy now. Like I just, I do it we all work full time, but I just do not draw like that in my spare time anymore. But I drew all the time, and I'm so glad I did back then, because again, I had a lot of, I do not have that energy, but I would draw all the time after school just for hours. And it was like, I would like, instead of, eating, I wouldn't even like we didn't really sit down and have family dinner just because there were so many of us kids, and we had like different sports, and so I would just kind of take my dinner up to my room and sit and draw and all that kind of stuff. And it was just so much. And to be honest, it was like, like I was saying, I don't regret doing it. But I do know that it's not exactly healthy. Like I was not spending much time with my family, and I was not seeing friends as much as I should have. So it was kind of like, it helped a lot. I think I obsessed over it, and that's where it helped me to learn. But I think it was a lot. It was I think it's just, obsessively drawing. And I think a lot of us, especially when we're younger, and I know a lot of people in college are the same way, but it was just like your whole life. I mean, that's when I discovered art, and it was like your whole life at the time that's all I cared about. And it was like genuinely the most fun I would have was drawing. And there's like just such a thrill that came with that. So I think it was just drawing nonstop. And I don't know if I had a way of studying really. It was just kind of, I would look at Glenn's drawings or other artists, like old Disney artists. I was really into Disney. And so I would look at their art and kind of, sometimes I would even just like print it out and trace over it, kind of learn what kind of lines they were using and whatnot. And I would just do a lot of, like, I read a lot of art books. Like I loved the Drawn to Life series. Was amazing. That was super helpful in just learning gesture and whatnot. And I think I would just, I used to make, actually, I think I made like checklists. Like at one point I had a sketchbook that was just, I had bought a few sketchbooks, and one was like set aside for just hands, one was set aside for like just figure drawings, one was a fun sketchbook that was like my character designs, and then another one was like animals. And it was like a stupid way to really do. I mean, some people maybe work that way, but for me it was a stupid way to do it, because I would think like, and I did it to an extent. Like I would focus on, I had like a checklist. Like I wanted to draw 100 hands from a certain amount of time, so I would do that. But it was just a lot. It was just a ton. So I would check off this little checklist. Like there's one hand, there's two hands, And so that weird, like, and I never finished it because it was just a weird thing to keep yourself to, like this, checklist and this very structured thing, because drawing isn't always very structured. But so that idea of having to force myself to do a certain amount or something wasn't probably the smartest, and I never really stuck to it. But I think that the general idea of what I was doing was just drawing it until, just drawing. When you draw something enough, you'll kind of, learn from it. And so I was just forcing myself to draw, and and then very quickly you'd start to look at your old stuff from old stuff that was like a week ago, and you'd be like, oh, that was so bad. I'm such a better artist. And, I'm so much better now. And still, it's like you just kind of would quickly improve and realize what you were doing wrong. And then I would also send my, now with everything online, you can, some people, I don't have time to respond. And I know that I get questions and don't have time to respond all the time, but I did back then as well message artists a lot and just ask for critique. And I think that was more helpful, even just because there were people. I mean, now it's kind of amazing that we have all this social media, and it's like you can ask your heroes, and a lot of people probably won't because they're nervous or they think they're bothering them. And sometimes people don't have time to respond. But it's like when you do get, I didn't have so many people that would email me back and give critique, but the few that did, it was like those were the people that, really, it made me look at my work a different way, and it made me like analyze from a different perspective and not feel so attached to it. And also, a lot of those people ended up being, it kind of becomes a connection sometimes if you message back and forth enough. And then they often, when I was younger, they'd offered to like let me tour me around some of the studios. And so then it's just more of that, getting to know people. And that's how I met Ted from DreamWorks, who brought me to CTN. So it's just kind of like, I think, I don't know. I mean, I think just working and just, seeking critique and seeking at that time, I think, like right now, I think if I get too much in my head about my work or the stuff I'm doing for the project, then I start to go into this unhealthy spiral. But back then it was like all was on my plate was to get better. And obviously still now I want to get better and continue getting better, but it's like sometimes you just have to do your job. So back then it was like my job was to learn. And we're always learning now, still on the job, but I think back then it was much, now I welcome critique, and I obviously get critique from work, and you're always critiquing yourself, and everyone's kind of their biggest critic anyway. But I think back then it was just, that was the mission, is to draw nonstop and, get as much critique as I can from outside sources. And it was a lot. So again, I don't think everyone needs to do that. I think, do what works for you, but I think realistically that's what helped me at least
I think those sketchbook you mentioned, you might not have filled all of them with those hand studies, but at least it shows the commitment or the passion you had to learn and to improve. I think you clearly had in mind where you wanted to go, and I think that really helps. And I also thought about I at the time it wasn't as easy to connect with artists you admired. So I remember actually writing letters to if I know, if I could even find the address. So and usually I wouldn't hear back, but I tried.
That's awesome. Yeah.
And
that's great. That's how easy it is now.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so I don't think being shy is helping yourself. You can't just send a message, and the worst case scenario, you don't get a response.
Exactly. And it feels personal, but it's not. It's just like people just don't have time, and some people will have time, and again, those people. It's so easy now. You don't even have to make it so formal. Like I do think. Obviously, I think I know there's a lot of people that you get emails sometimes that are like very, when I say not formal, I don't mean like some people just will kind of ask questions in a kind of blunt way, and they don't seem very polite, and and it feels like they're expecting you to give them critique. And so in that way, it's kind of like, okay, well, make sure you're polite and formal in how you like type out the word. It doesn't have to be an essay, but it's like, be polite, be nice and understanding. And but by not as formal, it's like there's Instagram, there's Twitter, there's all this stuff that is you can send a question that's just a tweet, and it's very easy. And sometimes I think it's easier to respond to those and emails are great too. But sometimes when it's like a shorter, when it's a big email, it's sometimes I think extremely daunting to someone right away, even if the questions are very reasonable.
Yeah.
Is because you're like, oh, it's a lot of words, like, and then I think people may forget to respond just because it's something, if you're busy with work and you're like, oh, I'll get back to it, but then you end up, kind of not having the time to get back to it. And so sometimes I think, yeah, just Instagram and stuff. And Instagram, it's the only thing I don't love about Instagram messages is that I hate texting or I hate typing on my phone. I like messaging with a keyboard. And so I don't often respond to like the private Instagram messages because I'm just like, I don't want to like, just sick of being on my phone. Like I like, at least on a computer, it goes a little, maybe that's just me. I'm just bad at,
Well, I have
texting,
that too,
but
but I see a lot of kids with, with their both thumbs. They can
yeah.
type really fast, and I'm still like
I'm
a
good.
so.
Yeah. And autocorrect always gets me, and I'm just like it also on a computer. It's like easier to see what you're typing as a whole, like because it's not just a vertical,
Yeah.
and so it's just easier for me in that way. But what I mean is like yeah, like Twitter. Twitter's a great one. I think there's just so many, yeah. And so it's like it doesn't even seem as scary. I know it's still daunting because I know that I always felt like I didn't want to be a burden or that I don't know, and it did feel like even though it wasn't, I know that it felt like, oh, they didn't respond to me. Did I bother them or something like that? And it never means that, but I know that that's kind of the case. But yeah, I think like there's some of these Twitter and Instagram, artists are so much more accessible and even like you can respond, you can ask a question on a story and it's on Instagram story and it's there. And so those are really helpful. But yeah, reaching out is so important. Writing letters, you can still write letters
You could try.
if you want. You can try.
And so when it comes to social media, a lot of people have a love-hate relationship with social media. When they're posting, they don't want to post just for the likes, but when they don't get
Yeah.
likes, they
Yeah.
they do want them, and they don't just want to create art to post, but at the same time they want their art to be seen. How's
Mhm.
that for you? How do you feel about social media?
I think it's tricky now because I've been I mean, I feel so bad. I haven't posted in forever just because with work, I've been so busy and I just don't do enough personal work. But I know that, yeah, so I haven't posted in a long time. So I think that's kind of, the more into work I get actually, and and I'm posting less, but also I just start to, I don't care as much as I used to, and I think maybe it's because that was much more important to me when I was starting out, and so I think that was definitely true for me as well. Is like you'd feel, it's about the artwork, you'd post the artwork, but there's always like the thing about how like fan art gets so much more likes and whatnot, and that's definitely a thing because it's like a known character and people like to see something they know, and so it's just funny like when you'd post, it makes sense, but it's like when you'd post fan art versus when you'd post the original work and it'd be like the likes would just be like so different. And I think I don't know, before I used to, not that I was after likes and follows or anything, but it did mean in a sense that more people were seeing it, and at the time that was fairly important because you want to have recruiters potentially see it. You want the more people see it, the more it might lead to something, because that's what a lot of the things I have gotten have been, or in the past at least, was through social media, and it's just people being like, oh, I remember seeing a post by you, and so I was thinking of when we started this project, I thought of your work, and I was like, oh, cool, so, and then also that happened actually with with Glenn Keane. It was like I drew an aerial fan art and he had seen it somehow. I don't know how he saw it, and that's I think what introduced that he found my work through that somehow, and then that's what led to the job with Glenn. And I was like,
Wow.
that was a weird, yeah, that was
Yeah. That must
a
have been
weird thing.
you going full circle when you got
Yeah,
to work with him.
I know, yeah, it was crazy, and I've told him that. Like, I was just like, everything. I'm sure he hears all the time. It's like Tangled is what got me into it, and everything. But yeah, no, I think posting like now if I post, obviously you might compare it to what you've done in the past, but I think also now I'm kind of in this weird funk because I haven't posted so long. So when I do post now, I kind of expect that it's not going to do very well. But at the same time, I think part of why I don't care as much, not that I don't care, I don't think anyone doesn't care. Like I think it'll feel, you'd like for things to do well, and when they're not getting the greatest feedback, you're kind of like, oh, yeah, it's just it's natural. But I think part of why it's not as I don't post as much as well is just because one I'm busy with work, but also I just a lot of not that I'll stop posting because I still think it's important. I just haven't been. But I think part of why it's not as important to me now is that now instead of my connections only or people slash recruiters seeing your work only through posting and stuff, it's like I've been working longer now, so it's like now a lot of those aren't from posts I make. They're from like, oh, we've worked together before. Even if they have no idea about my social media or whatever, it's like we've worked together, and so that's where kind of work has come. So I think I've just purely been focusing on work more than
Yeah, so
posting lately.
you're saying that the connections you already have now lead to new jobs and not just your
Yeah,
posts on Instagram. Okay.
yeah. Like I think I actually should post more because one of the those frustrating parts about uh, that is like a lot of the work I've posted has been so long now, and it's like a lot of that is it feel with all of us, it's like once things are a few weeks old, we're like, oh my god, that's so I could do so much. It's just like you think it's so old and so much worse than it is, and so I think the hard part about like working on projects, especially if they don't see the light of day, is like
Yeah.
people aren't seeing and they can't see what you're working on now, and so it's like I think I'm just holding out to like because I just don't do much personal work. I'm kind of like hoping that I can hopefully start posting work as some of these movies come out. Like I know Over the Moon should be coming out. I think it's this year. But once hopefully as movies that we've worked on start to come out, you're hoping that you can at least show that work. But even that will be like old work by this
Yeah.
time it's being
Yeah.
released, and so it's kind of I don't know. I think to the point of if it I don't know if it bothers me that I don't like I think there is a little sense of that because I haven't posted in so long, it starts to build on itself. Like I'm like, well, if I haven't posted in so long, I should post something that's pretty decent because if I haven't posted in months and then I post this like crappy little doodle, it's like, oh, and so then it kind of perpetuates like not posting because you're
Yeah.
like, oh well, it has to be pretty good, and and
Yeah.
so
Because you worked on it
that's I
for
think
months. It has to be amazing.
yeah yeah exactly yeah I've been working months on this drawing. That's why I haven't been posting. Yeah, it is tricky. Do you feel that way? Do you think in your social media interest kind of fluctuates at all?
Yeah, it's a constant. Well, I don't want to say struggle, but I'm constantly looking for what works for me. So,
Yeah,
and I do have I'm really happy to hear that you have that faith in the connections you already have. I still think
yeah,
I have that fear of being forgotten when I stop posting. And the fun
yeah,
thing is that a lot of directors that I've worked with never even look at my social media
yeah.
because
Exactly. Yeah,
so it's maybe less important. What I don't want to do is to create work just to post. I want to create work
yeah,
because I feel passionate
hmm
about it, and when it's there, that's when I'll post it. So
yeah,
I'm trying to figure out if same as you mentioned before, where you had the sketchbook and tried to structurize things. Uh,
yeah,
I try that all the time, and like you, I come to the same conclusion that drawing or the creative process is not as structured. So, when I
no, yeah, not for me.
and right now for what I'm trying now is to have a theme for studies each week. So I do
Yeah,
gesture drawings this week, and then next week I do portraits, and then the week
yeah,
after, and that kind of works right now. At least it gives a focus, because
Yeah.
the other side of it is that, I'm all over the place, and well, I'm doing this now, and it kind of leads nowhere. So I'm trying to find
Yeah.
this structure so that I'm also working towards something. But for
Yeah.
example, creating a comic or a graphic novel, that's something I don't think I could ever do. That's such a
Me
big
too.
project,
Yeah.
and a focus
Yeah.
in one direction all the time.
Exactly.
That's too hard.
I totally agree. Yeah, because I get bored of things so quickly. I'm like off to the next drawing
Yeah,
and oh yeah, no, I think that's smart though. I think because I think we do need some structure. Like it's always a balancing act because if it's too much, you're like I know with working in feature, sometimes it's like once things start to get in production, obviously you do it because it's your job and whatnot. But things start to get, I feel like I start to lose my flow or even my confidence when things start to get in production sometimes because you're hitting tasks and it's the job, so you do it. But it's like you start to feel like you're not actually thinking of it in a design sense anymore. You're kind of just thinking of it to get it done, which is sometimes what you need. Sometimes that's just how it's got to be
yeah,
done. But I know that. So it's such a weird, because then sometimes, like when it's really heavy in production like that, it can get to where it's too, it seems too structured, and you're like, and it has to be because it's to get the project done, but it seems like a lot. And then sometimes when it's actually the opposite, when you're in the blue sky phase and you're like experimenting, or when it's really early and you're thinking the designs, and even maybe the director doesn't even know which direction they want to head. Sometimes it's like even that, and then in that case, sometimes it's like you need more because I'm like, well, what what do you think you want? Like
yeah,
what,
yeah,
because it's sometimes it's like, and
yeah,
some people maybe love that, but for me, there's too much freedom as well, like you were saying, like where you kind of have to at least give yourself a theme. It's like
yeah,
if I were to like sit down and be like, okay, I'm gonna draw personal work for the first time in months for my Instagram. It's like I don't know. It seems it's so like daunting to just think like of something to think pull from inspiration, because by that point, unless I am inspired by something actually, it's like I'm just gonna draw my generic, like a pretty girl as all, like it's just gonna be, you're gonna fall back into, at least for me, I fall back into what
yeah,
is comfortable. Um, so
yeah,
yeah, and themes is actually a good way of doing it.
yeah. And often if you don't start with the idea that this has to become this final image, but you just
Yeah,
start doodling and let ideas flow from there, that's also
yeah.
often a good way to let things evolve.
Yeah, exactly. And so often things change from what they, were. I never really tell myself what something's going to be. I kind of just uh, doodle until something happens. But I also I don't think I've ever, maybe, I don't know if I've ever really like, especially now because I haven't, and it shows because I haven't posted in forever. But it's like I just don't do work either with the intention to post it. Um, and I don't know. I mean, then I'm wondering if I ever did before when I did post a lot. And I don't know if I did. I don't think I ever drew two posts. I think I was genuinely drawing so much that I had at least something to post. So it was like, but now, yeah, I think I just can't. I think that's part of why I don't post anymore is because I'm like, if I don't want to draw, I'm just not going to draw, and it's going to be okay. Like, and so with social media too, it's kind of hard, and kind of goes along with that when you're working on films that don't get released for years. I start to feel a disconnect from me and my social media because I'm like, I don't feel like I do work like that anymore.
Oh
And
yeah,
it's always similar. It's not so different, but yeah, it's like
yeah,
it's like it feels like, oh, well, that's not an accurate representation. So it's not even until I can post certain things, it's not even an accurate portfolio, to be honest, because
yeah,
it's also old. Yeah. So
yeah,
it's hard to use now, which is, it's interesting actually. It's interesting to think about because I used to be so like so into social media, and I still am. Like I think it's important, especially in the beginning. But yeah, now it's not. I just don't. I've never actually thought about how I don't use it as much anymore. But
okay.
yeah,
It's interesting. It's so interesting to see how different people relate to social media. I just saw that lowish, she now has 2 million
Yeah,
followers.
I know. I
So I
saw
was like,
that. She's
whoa.
so killing it. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, here we are. Like I haven't posted in months. Yeah, no, she's amazing. I mean, like I don't know. I've heard a lot of her talks as well. And she's very she has such a good way of structuring, and it seems to work so well for her. And I think I'm still trying to find what works for me, and I'm sure she is too. I'm sure she's always changing and changing how she does things. But yeah, no, her and now she has Patreon. She's like really doing it the perfect the perfect way, and it's awesome. But
Yeah.
yeah, I'm like, oh, I don't post ever. But I think yeah, I don't know. I think it's a tricky one. I think, that's also a funny point, is because I remember like for the longest time, and again, it goes along with the like, do we care about likes and followers, and how much does that, affect it? And obviously, I think no one will say that that's all it is, because it's not. But again, it goes into that point of like, well, the more people that see your work, the more opportunities. But I know for a while, it's not something and I don't think about it now, and that's like goes along with not posting and not really caring as much. But I remember for a long time I noticed, the followers kind of just happened, and you don't know why, because you're kind of like, well, I'm not that great. Like, why are they happening? And it was just kind of always on the up. And then obviously, like now, I'm so dead. It's like I don't, it's been a constant number for a long time, and that's I'm like I don't, and it's fine with me. Like you'd think I would think like I think old me would have been like, what's happening? Like, I must be
Okay, yeah.
bad now. Like, like what? Yeah, I think I would have been bothered by that. Like, not even like not like it's a personal tech, but it'd be like, what am I doing to
Yeah.
like, but now it's just like, I'm like, again, I think it's just a disconnect that's happening for me is again, like not only a disconnect in the artwork, where the artwork doesn't feel exactly like it represents me anymore, but I'm also like disconnected from the following as well, because like I'm super appreciative. I appreciate everything that comes from that, and it's so great to have. But I think I still, it's like I don't feel like they're seeing the work that I'm doing, and then it's when obviously it's all hidden, so so that can't be done. But it's also just a disconnect where you're kind of like, I don't feel like and I think this gets into the artist like self-deprecation thing. It's like I'm like, I just don't feel like I deserve that, and I think that's the whole, ever since I've had social media, and I think most artists feel that it's a disconnect, because you're kind of like, I don't actually believe
Mm.
there's that many people there following me,
Well,
even though
I
that's the
just
number.
saw this in the chat. I saw someone
Uh-huh.
ask, "Please tell her to post more. We miss her."
I know, like it is kind of shocking actually, because I'm surprised. I look sometimes and I'm like, oh, it's been like a month since I posted, but it's been I mean it's been like a year almost, or I don't know, a long time,
Wow.
and I'm like, and I don't remember. I'd have to look, but I'm like scared to look. It's but it is like, yeah, I don't think I realize how often I don't do it. I think I've just been so caught up in just everything with work, and work's gotten more heavy this year, and now I think moving had a lot to do with it. I
Oh
think
yeah.
once things settle down, I'll probably take some more, because sometimes I'm like, I used to a lot when I was working for work. I would like kind of find myself sometimes, if it was getting too much, I'd start doodling on my own, and that's when I would start drawing and then posting, because I'd kind of
Mm.
during work hours, I would end up kind of straying into my own personal work, and that would be kind of a break for me, and then I'd get
Yeah.
back to work. And now it's like, and I had a little more time, and so now work's just been so fast and heavy that I just don't even have that time. So I think that's why everything's not been happening. So I'm hoping that kind of that like more lenient time will come, and that's maybe
Mm.
what will drive the
Yeah.
personal work again. I also find
And
that's when I start drawing fan art again, is when I'm like, I do want to draw personal work, but I don't want to have to think about what I'm drawing. So I'll
yeah.
do fan art.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, cool. I was also thinking, you used to work in-house a lot, and now
Mm-hmm.
you're never freelancing. Is it the duration of the projects that you're on, is it just as long or is it shorter now?
I would say, yeah, because I'm trying to think. Like every project, I don't think I've ever been on a single project. Like I may have been at Sony for over, I was at Sony for over a year, but I was always, the projects were always less than like because you'd be on multiple at a time. And like right now, I'm like, I think the project I'm on, this is the longest project I've been on, I think was Glenn's, which was about a year. And so that was probably the longest, like where you kind of were there from start to at least not finish of the movie, but finish for character design at least. It was kind of nearing its end, and that went really fast actually, because usually it's not. I don't think it'd be that short, but that was probably the longest. Otherwise, yeah, and like you, I'm sure know, it's like projects come and go. They'll be shelved, and then you're not on it, and then maybe it'll come back, and then you're on it a little bit. But this one, yeah, I think I don't know. I feel like they're always really short. Like the longest was yeah, like about a year. This one expect I've been on since like the beginning of this year, and I expect it'll go. I'm being told it'll go on to next year if things work out. Um, so I think I don't know. It's always and you are jumping around a lot. And then at Blue Sky, of course, I was jumping around a ton. There was like so many, especially in development. I think is when you're jumping around. And when you're in a studio like at Blue Sky, I was working there in at the studio, but then it was like you would jump onto different projects for maybe like a few weeks, and it started to get really hard because at that point it was very frequent that they were switching the projects, and it's when you're in a studio, it's kind of easier for them to do that because they're all under one roof. So technically, you're working for, even though they're different projects, they're all for the same studio, but so it's a little easier for them to switch you onto different projects.
Yeah.
But I know at one point, yeah, at one point at Blue Sky, it was like it would be like it'd be like every 2 or 1 week, like I'd be switched onto another,
Okay.
and it'd not usually be different ones even. It'd be like back and forth from the same two or the same three. So it'd be projects that I'd worked on
Okay.
before, but it'd switch so often, and I'd
Yeah,
be
yeah,
like,
yeah.
I forget, you kind of like forget how to get back into it. You had just done a different style for something else, and it was really difficult to jump. And that's not, I don't think that's super common, but they were all very early development. And so I think that's why that was happening. And that's happened before at other studios. But yeah, you're usually, yeah, even though I'm working, now I'm like going to be steadily working from home, even when, and I know we're all working from home now, but, but even when, we're all, things hopefully go back to normal soon. And once things are normal again, I think we moved into a house out here in New York. So I think I'll be working consistently from home for a while, but I'd imagine, yeah, the projects will probably be, as things have been going, it'll feel like it's probably like projects usually switch between like 6 months to a year. So they're not exactly consistent, but they, I don't know, they're not consistent, and it seems very difficult when you hear it. And I'm sure you have the same, I'm sure you jump around as well doing freelance. It's like, it seems chaotic to anyone who listens, like to have to explain what we do to my parents or my siblings, or just, because they're all, a lot of my siblings and parents are in jobs that are, you're at where typically you start your work after college, and then you're kind of doing the same thing at the same place for most of, for years. And for us, it's like we switch different,
Yeah.
different employers all the time, and it's so complex. And so
Yeah, and
it
then
sounds, yeah, for them, it sounds like crazy.
yeah, and then the work that you do, you can't show it, and
I know, yeah.
when the movie comes out, well, I worked on that character, but it looked completely different then, and
Yeah, yeah.
you can't even show exactly what you did.
Exactly. Yeah. Sometimes you don't even, if you leave early enough on the project, and by the time things come out, you're like, you're like, did I decide? Because you're like, you're finding little bits of things you
Yeah.
think you did, but it definitely changed, and you're like, is that even this thing? Are there's new characters? Are those characters taken out? And it's just kind of, there's been a few I've been on that. There was one that came out, and I was like, I had worked on, and I was like, oh, this character's not even in it. So it was the only one I'd worked on, and I was like, okay, but it happened. But yeah, it's It's a tricky, yeah, it's hard to prove to people, like for people that don't really get it. It's like to all my, because I haven't been in animation for that long. It's been maybe like, I mean, I guess it's been like 5 years now that I've been working in for studios, and 5 years seems like decent amount of time, but it's like we all know like projects
Mm.
don't come out for a long time, and so it's only kind of just recent that some of the work I've been doing has come out finally, and for like to tell your parents and friends like I am working in animation, but you just don't see it yet. Like, I swear it's gonna be out. I'm working on this, and you can't ever even tell them usually because it's like not that they're all friends or family. They're not gonna tell people, but you're usually like I'm working on this project that has it's got this character that goes to see a monkey, and you're like you can't even because you can't even
Yeah,
really give
yeah.
them details, or
You're
and
like
so
that
you're like
person who already was fired, but every day you go to
yeah,
work and make people believe that you still have that job.
exactly. You're like, I swear, and it's to my parents, it's like, I swear I'm working. You don't, they'll never. And for some things, they don't ever see it because I know, like
Mm.
we worked on many projects that just
Yeah,
don't ever make it. And you're
that's
like,
right.
and so then my parents will be like, so whatever happened to that project? And I'm like, yeah, that's just not, it's not happening. They're like, the one you've worked on for a year? And I'm like, yeah, that's how it goes. It's crazy.
Yeah. So last week I spoke with Marcelo, and
Oh, yeah?
he spoke a little bit about the fractal method, and I had to think about that because um, you sometimes work in a way that is not uh, you're not drawing the character in
Mhm.
terms of lines, but you start
Yeah,
with shapes really and blocks
yeah.
of color. Uh,
Mhm.
is that related to the fractal method of Marcelo, or is it something you developed personally? And could you speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think like it's a weird. I don't even know how that started to happen because actually it's funny now. Because when I was younger, it was like that's all I did is I sketched and with line, and that's what you. And then if you colored it, it was like under the line, and it was just like coloring in. And then I started to. At one point, it was like I don't even think I thought about it. It was just I'd do that, and then I would start to see things. I would do the sketch and then color it, but then I would feel like I'd want to change things, but I wouldn't let myself change things because I was like, oh, I already finished the sketch. I'm not going to change the sketch. And you can't really do much with color underneath. And so eventually I started to like paint over parts of the sketch and fix it. And slowly it got to be more where like I got more comfortable messing up the sketch because you can in Photoshop. You're like, it's like you can just lasso tool and change size, and you always can undo. So it's a little safer. So I started to get more comfortable just like actually messing around and being kind of, I guess, more, yeah, it's definitely more, I mean, more painterly, definitely, like where I would uh, not feel so afraid to make some marks because I knew I could either paint over it or um, go back and undo. And so I would like, now I often have it's probably not the best habit. I like flatten every time I paint over something, I flatten my Photoshop. So it's like always on one layer almost, which can be dangerous because then you'll make them, marks and then you'll not be able to get rid of them. But it just helps to kind of, I think I trust myself that I will figure it out. It can be kind of stressful though. But then so slowly I started to like slowly tweak over top of sketches where eventually I didn't sketch at all. And if I did sketch, it was like I would do like a gesture drawing with like a circle as the head and like a line of action maybe. And then I would just throw paint on top of it. And just kind of, it seems weird. I don't even know how to explain because it's so, like, to me, I sometimes hate that I work that way because it's so, like, it's a lot of pressure until you finally get it to look kind of like a human. Like, it's kind
Mm.
of like, I'm like, what is this blobby mess? But the reason I think I've quickly gone into that is because it helps me so much more to see the shape of the design and like the silhouette. And because I feel like now and some people with line, they can do that and they can see it that way. But for me, it was like, I, I don't get as much crispness. I also think I don't go as extreme when I do line drawing. I think I like stay a little too, that's when it leads me to be a little too worried about anatomy and all this stuff. And you should be like when you're drawing, but I think I cheat a lot more in paint, and it helps the drawing to be more fun, or I push the designs more than I would with line. Um, but yeah, no, I think painting, I mean, now, yeah, I just will I just start with color. And it's a weird, I mean, and you kind of do that as well. You do both, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
and I like so now, but when I do have to do line for like I'm working actually now on some poses for the project, and it's like I'm doing since painting takes so long, I'm like, okay, well if I'm doing poses, then I'm gonna just do sketches because I just don't have the time to
Yeah.
paint all of them because they take so long to figure out. So I'm just doing sketches, and it's fine, but it's like I just feel it feels more unnatural to me. Like I'll get there, but it's almost, and even when I'm sketching, I'm still kind of painting. Like I have like on Photoshop, the two colors I switch between is just like the canvas color and the black or whatever of the sketch. And I'll like, instead of I don't know, it's like a weird hybrid. I don't,
Yeah.
and I feel like my poses are, even though they're poses, which should be really extreme, I feel like they don't get as
Hmm.
organic as I do with painting. And I don't, definitely shapes aren't as far, or don't go as far to me. Um, but yeah, I don't know. It's weird now because now I can't sketch in sketchbooks, and that's all I did when I was
Hmm.
younger. But yeah, now I don't think I'd ever. I mean, now I do not do traditional
So it's really
stuff,
a
which
different way of thinking then.
yeah, because I just don't. And I guess I could try, actually painting with actual paint. But I think even there, I'm like, well, there's no undo button. Like, what, what am I gonna do? So it's like my safe space is
Yeah, yeah.
having Photoshop to paint. Yeah,
Yeah, well,
but no,
just whatever tool works for you, right?
yeah, and it's complex sometimes because I worry that a lot of people are like, you don't have to color, and I'm like, when I'm working on projects, they're like, it's okay if you don't want to color. Like, I know that takes a long time, and it does take longer, but I'm always like, well, no, it's I'm not like coloring under something. It's the color is part of how
It,
I do the design. Yeah.
yeah, that's the thing.
Yeah, and it's hard to explain. And sometimes they get it and sometimes they'll be like, yeah, then do. They're like, oh yeah, then that's fine. Then if that's how you work, then do that. But sometimes it's like you can tell they just want speed, and
Yeah.
I'm like, that's when I'm like, oh no, like because I hate doing, especially for like with these poses. I said I'm doing line, and that's like better, but it's because they're not in the design phase. It's more like taking it and doing poses, but with when I'm actually in design, I feel like I do need to paint, and I don't. I luckily so far, and I'm sure there might be at a point where I can't do this, but so far they've been flexible. Every project, like they allow me to work. I think most of them they're like whatever is your best way of. They just want the best work, so
Yeah.
they're like if you work best
Well, that
doing
seems
your
smart.
weird painting thing. Yeah, exactly. It makes sense. And I hope they continue to be that way.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, yeah, I don't, if I feel like I'm doing crap work when I'm using a different method,
Mm.
then yeah, it's freeing too. So most of them have been, I think so far actually, all of them have been, they are fine with whatever you want to do as long as it doesn't take like 5 years to
Yeah, yeah.
get done.
Yeah.
But it does take longer. Like the painting does take a lot longer typically. I mean, I've gotten faster at it just because that's how I work now. But it's still like you're working with color, so you're kind of
Yeah,
using
but you
paint
also
forms different.
leave things very rough sometimes. It's just
Yeah.
communicating the idea. So I think I've never noticed you being any slower than any of the others.
That's so nice to hear. That's always like the biggest like fear, and at least with when I'm working for projects, is I'm always just like I think a lot of us feel that way. If I'm not going fast enough. Everybody's like drawing faster than me, and I'm going
Yeah.
slow, and yeah, that's always I think one of my
I know the
stresses is just
feeling.
being
Yeah.
slow.
Yeah, me
Yeah,
too.
because you
And then
compare what
especially
everybody's.
And then especially when you're working from home, then you can't really
Yes.
compare it to anything. So all you can do is just
Yeah,
give them as much as possible.
I know. But it's so tricky too, because then it's like you sometimes you are working. I think one of my biggest struggles often also, and it's so hard when you're working because it's like you feel that guilt again about like there's times when you're drawing and you're painting and you're doing design or whatever you're doing, and you're drawing, you're working, but you just can't draw right. Like there's just days I'm like not good at drawing. Like I can't draw a hand right, and
Yeah.
I'm like, or I draw something and it just looks ugly, and I'm like I can't fix it. I keep throwing it away,
Yes.
redoing it, and that's always so frustrating because I'm like, and I know every artist kind of
Yeah.
runs into that, but because it's like you are working, you're
Yeah,
not,
I
and
know,
you
yeah.
feel so guilty because then you feel like you need to work overtime because you're
Yeah,
like, well, I wasted their time, and
yeah,
you're like,
yeah.
no, I mean, and it's part of the and I'm still in I always struggle with that because I'm like, sometimes I'm like, no, it's just part of the process. Like, I'm fine.
Yes.
But
I
then
know,
other
yeah.
times I'm like, yeah, sometimes it's like, no, but but no one else has this problem, even though everyone does. I'm like,
Yeah.
no one else is like, I'm an imposter, it's the whole imposter thing. It's a mess.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Let's see if we have some questions. I know that someone sent me a question which was about the copyright of characters. Obviously, when you work for studios, you don't own
Hmm.
the copyright of your characters.
Yeah.
And is that something that you have a problem with, or do you have characters that you would like to keep for yourself?
I think not, I don't think so. I think for me, I've kind of, like if obviously with personal, I think I'm kind of different to where I don't like I part of why I don't post also is like I think I'm not so tied to, maybe this is wrong and maybe this will change, but I'm not so tied to my personal work and like I don't know. I felt like when I went to Cal Arts, actually, so many. I don't know if this is gonna tangent, but when I went to Cal Arts, everybody was so, and it's rightfully so. They were like, this is what I want my artist voice to be, and I want to be bringing this to the world, and it was very like very philosophical, and then it was great, super, really artistic and beautiful and great. And but I was always just kind of like, I want a job like in drawing because I do love drawing, but I was like, that's just kind of what I want. I want to do it because I love it, but for a job. And so I think I've always just kind of, not to say that I don't want any, I don't want everything to be owned by other things. So I think if I was more worried about that, I would probably do more personal projects, and create more like original characters and whatnot. And so I think I don't think it bothers me in terms of like I've never thought about it with the work that I'm doing for the projects. I think I could see where that comes into play when you're I think, well, it's also kind of hard to feel that way because when you are on a project, typically the character you designed is almost never just by you. Like it's always touched by other designers. So what ends up being in the film actually doesn't, sometimes somewhat, maybe sometimes one character is kind of more on one character artist. Like sometimes if there's two character designers on a project, maybe one has done a bit more work on this other one and one has done more on this other one. You could say like this one designed this one, this other
Yeah.
designer designed this character, but typically I feel like it's just not usually, at least so far in my experience, it's been so it's not been so clear. So I feel like I think it's more like I just don't feel like I own any of them anyway myself because I don't feel like I was the only one who designed them. Um, I could see like I could see in a case where you did feel that way, maybe you would feel a little more ownership. But yeah, I don't think I feel like I designed the character myself ever. So I don't think I run into that.
Hmm.
Because even sometimes like on projects where the final design is something maybe I did, it's typically something that I've used inspiration from the other concepts that
Yeah.
other people have done. So it's kind of like, I think for me, I don't really feel that way. I think the way I would prevent that is like to just continue doing more personal work that I could like use in a book or use it
Yeah.
for prints or something. Because I think that's the only catch that I do get is because I don't do so much personal work and I do so much work that is owned by other people. It's like by the time I have to do Lightbox or something, I just have to create new work because I just was like, there's nothing I can,
Yeah,
I
yeah, yeah.
can't print any. This isn't mine. And so yeah, no, that's a good question, but I don't know if I actually have thought about that. But I think yeah, I think it's just kind of that where I think it's a little too muddled in who does
Yeah, and
what.
you're always working under direction, so it's
Yeah, that
your
too.
design is also altered by the notes that you get and the direction they want you to push it. And then also, I
Yeah.
think if you would have a problem with it, it would be really hard to do the work because There's no
Yeah.
studio who's going to give you the copyrights.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. I think also sometimes just the reality of character design is things, often the designs that we artists, and this goes for visual development stuff too, is like often the reality is the designs that you prefer or that you're more proud of does kind of get watered down or lost, like things have to be made for production and for marketing. And so a lot of things change from that initial design you did. Not to say that you never enjoy what ends up happening. Like I do, there's a lot of characters that, you design and then they change and then you're still very proud of what you did. But I think they're so disconnected from what my idea was anyway,
Yeah.
that I'm kind of like, well, it's not even exactly what I would do. Like, so I don't even want to take ownership fully of it.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm like, some of it I don't love. Like,
Mm.
um, but yeah, that's a good question. I hadn't actually thought of that.
Yeah. Let's see if there are. Are you able to show traditional drawings to studios, or do you always work on digital for feature films?
You can, I think this goes into our like painting, digital painting thing is I think any way you want. I think whatever works for the artist, they just want your best work. I could
Yeah.
see where sometimes it's quicker to get stuff digitally, but not for everybody. Like some people do work quicker with traditional stuff, and if they can just scan it on time and make sure
Yeah.
it's in the computer, then it's fine. I think the quickness from digital is purely because it's so easy to save and share a screen or something. But no, I don't. I think I've worked on many. Like Marcelo's a great example. Actually, is he does so much of his stuff traditionally, and it's so great. And he does both, but he just, they're happy taking whatever he is happy doing because he
Yeah.
works so well that way. Yeah.
There's another question. Do you remember the interview for the Disney internship? Did they have you do some kind of test? What was the interview process, if you remember?
Yeah, and that one's a little tricky because I did have a weird situation because I met Dawn um, she was the recruiter for at the time for the internship, and I met her at CTN, and it was in person, and I had brought my portfolio, so she had seen my character portfolio, and then what happened I ended up emailing her later, like, hey, when are the applications going to come up? And then she emailed me like, oh, I remember you. Yeah, you can do it. And so, so I didn't actually, it was really lucky. I mean, I was very lucky and I don't know how that happened, but she was kind of like, I think she just liked what I had shown her. And she was like, yeah, you're in. And I was like, okay. And so I didn't really have a normal, and I got very lucky in that sense that it worked out really weird where I didn't actually apply. But I did in a way. I guess my application was me showing her my work, and so I don't actually know technically what they do because I didn't do it through their website. I'm trying to think if I know. I think, but even if you do go through the website, you do I think just upload, unless it's changed. I think you just upload your files or your website. So I don't remember there being like an interview. Even for the people like Jacob, my boyfriend did the internship as well, and it may have changed. It's been 5 years, but I think even for them, for most of the interns that we were with, I think it was like you just uploaded your work and then they'd get back to you. And I think I'd assume from there they would call and maybe, but I think it's more about the work. I think at least for character design,
Yeah.
I think it was just about the portfolio.
And the internship itself, what did that look like? Did they give you assignments, or did you work on actual projects?
Yeah, it was with the internship. So, because if you're in the there's the internship, at least at Disney, there's the internship, summer internship, and then there's the talent development program. And the talent development programs for people that are like coming out of college that are expecting work afterward. And the internship was meant for, it may have changed, but it was meant for, I think it still is meant for people that are currently in college but still have some time to graduate. And so they're not looking for work right after the internship. And so so we didn't work on the talent development group is allowed to work on, they'll work sometimes on features. and stuff like that, because hopefully they'll get a job afterward with Disney. But with the internship, it was just personal projects that had nothing to do with any of Disney's actual films. I think sometimes they'll release intern films that the interns all work together, and then they'll release that as like a short film on their social media and whatnot. Our year again was a really weird year, because it was the first year they were trying a generalist program, and so actually we weren't doing. They did well. There was a short film. There was like a short film by the end of it, but it was all generalist. So actually, usually what Disney does, and I think this is what they do now, because this was like a one-time thing from what I remember. They were testing it out, but now they do like they have like an intern that's a character designer. They have an intern that's a biz dev environment artist. There's an intern that does rigging. There's an intern that does character modeling, and then there's animator and stuff like that. And at the time, it was weird because we all came in as generalists, but then I again was like, I didn't go to college. I was just out of school, and I just did drawing characters. So I was like, so they had come up to me and they were like, this is actually what this internship is. Do you think you can? And I was like, I thought it was for character. So I was like, I don't know how to do any of that. And so they actually, for me, they did end up giving me character design mentors, and I did a separate project. So I can speak for, so that all the other interns did work together in a short film, but they all did like little bits of everything. Whereas I think now they do have specific interns that kind of focus. But for me, since I was in this weird little, so they did give me character. So I essentially got what I imagine the art character design interns get now. It was just me for some reason. Is they gave me like a project, and then I would just like like a story. They gave me almost like, it wasn't this, but like when people do like Little Red Riding Hood for their portfolio or something, they gave me like a theme, like a story, and then I just worked on characters for that. And it was like, we'd take some time a few weeks to develop the character, and the mentors, it was She and Kim and Nick Orsi were my mentors, and they were awesome. And I learned a lot from them, but we'd spend time doing development first and just doing a lot of sketching and rough stuff. And then we would try and focus it. And it was kind of mimicking a pipeline. It's like you do the blue sky phases, then you kind of narrow it down for like expression sheets and turns for production. And so it was kind of just mimicking that. I don't think it was kind of we didn't have much time. It was only 8 weeks, so I didn't actually get like a finished portfolio out of it. But it was just a lot of like learning. It was more than anything, to me, it wasn't, I didn't get a portfolio really out of it, but for me, the more valuable part was Nick and Shiyun, like kind of, they basically imitated what you do with a director, and that was what I learned so much from, is like how the process works.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how it's kind of what it went for me. It kind of just emulated in a mini way what you kind of do.
Cool. Very, very cool.
It was awesome.
That sounds great. Yeah.
Learned a lot. They were awesome.
We've been talking for way more than an hour. I just want to thank you.
Easy for us to do.
Yeah. I just want to thank you for taking the time to do this. And for me, it was really inspiring. It was good to see you again. And I hope people enjoyed it as well. I don't want to take up more of your time. So thank you very much. And
thank you.
Good
I
luck
love
with
talking.
the project. Yeah.
Thank you. All righty.
Okay. Bye-bye.